In this story, Day 1 at the Jive 95. I'm Joanne Green. The contrast between working conditions at KRE and those of the typical San Francisco radio station in the mid-1970s was stunning. KRE's door was never locked. Messages were written on a pad of pink "while you were out" paper and stuck on a spindle on the front desk. We replaced the typewriter ribbons ourselves, and there was no hot running water in either of the bathrooms. Our general manager and sales staff negotiated trade agreements with local restaurants. Ads for food, basically. So a big perk was periodically getting to feast on the salad bar at the El Cerrito station. For 4 years at KRE, I honed my skills and periodically interviewed for jobs in the city at radio stations that offered far more in the way of decor, professionalism, and salary, but a lot less in terms of soul. And then I heard about an opening at KSAN, the legendary rock station whose claim to fame was not only the music, but the news. It's where every young person in the San Francisco Bay Area turned for the truth, and the KSAN News delivered. There were no stories from the police blotter. That was better left to local television. The KSAN News team curated the news, focusing on issues that had impact, often covering only a few stories in a 5-minute newscast when there was a lot to say. Rather than reading from a script, as was and continues to be standard practice in radio news, KSAN News people told you the news. They spoke directly to you, one-on-one, often bantering back and forth with a co-anchor or even the on-air jock. My first day of work on the KSAN News team was a bit traumatic. I arrived at 345 Sansom Street with some anxiety, having never anchored news before. I went directly to the newsroom and found some piles of torn wire copy from the Associated Press and Reuters news services, and no sign of a human being. "Excuse me, I'm Joanne Rosenzweig, the new news person. Do you know where Dave McQueen is?" I asked someone who happened to be passing by in the hallway. Dave was the news director and my co-anchor for the noon news. The guy in the hall looked at his watch and grinned. "Oh, Dave's probably asleep on the couch in the front office. That's generally where he is between 9 and noon." I gulped and slowly nodded, wondering how I was supposed to prepare the newscast without any direction. Okay, I thought I'll just read over all the copy that he pulled for the morning drive casts and continue to rip updates from the wires. An hour passed, and my heart rate was gradually increasing as I ran back and forth from the newsroom to the tiny area that housed the wire machines, checking on updates from Associated Press and Reuters. What the hell? Why isn't he here to welcome me and tell me what he expects? Isn't there any training? I'd been hired by Abby Malamed, the program director, and she was out at a meeting. I went into the production room and asked Rick, the production director, what he thought I should do. "It's after 11:30, Rick said, sympathetically. "I think it's fine to go wake him up and tell him you need to figure out the new news." "He won't be angry?" I asked, hoping that Rick would offer to go wake him up and save me the awkwardness and potential humiliation. Rick shrugged and smiled. I had the immediate sense that Rick would be a friend and ally, even though he wasn't making the morning any easier for me. With trepidation, I began walking toward the front office. Peeking in, I saw Dave asleep on the couch, his long brown hair strewn across a throw pillow. "Dave," I whispered. No response. "Dave," I said, a bit louder this time. Still no sign of life. I held my breath for a moment, wondering what I'd done to deserve this, and said, in a somewhat louder voice, "David!" That did it. He moved, opened one eye, and started to stretch. And then he continued to stretch, until gradually he began to sit up. Then he grabbed a hairbrush from the table and began to brush his nearly waist-length brown hair, bending his head down and flipping all of his locks back over his head, brushing it from the other side. Was this his ritual upon waking up? He didn't seem like a fastidious person, yet this hairbrushing seemed to be going on and on. I stared in disbelief and started babbling. "I cleared the wires and read over what you'd done in the morning newscasts, but I'm not sure how you want to handle the noon. It's 11:40 now, maybe later, and I'm starting to get concerned that we need time to prep." Dave continued to brush his hair, not yet responding to my semi-panicked diatribe. When he finished stretching, yawning, and brushing, he walked out of the room and down the long hall to the newsroom. I followed, wondering how in hell we were going to properly prepare to deliver a newscast. Maybe my notion of properly was about to go out the window. Man, did I have a lot to learn. Upon entering his sanctuary, a small room with a couple of typewriters and an audio board, he began cutting outlines of cocaine on the countertop with a razor blade. I tried hard not to give any indication of how shocked and frankly pissed I was. Was this standard operating procedure here, or just his way of welcoming the newbie? "No, thank you," I said when he handed me a rolled-up dollar bill, indicating that it was my turn after snorting a fat line himself. "I'm really getting nervous about the newscast," I said pleadingly. "I mean, isn't the newscast in 10 minutes? What a rookie, he must be thinking. Why did we hire her? David grabbed a pile of copy, flipping through the stories, then looked up and said, "What else you got?" Somehow we divvied up the piles and I stumbled through my first KSAN newscast, barely absorbing the content that I was sharing with the radio audience. David sounded as authoritative and in control as he always did. Was he always high on the air? I was in a state of shock and wondered how I was ever going to build a rapport with my news director and co-anchor. But time heals much, and we later became good friends, spending many an evening as couples, drinking red wine and pontificating about the state of our nation. Decades later, Dave and I co-anchored audio programs for Hewlett-Packard. Rest in peace, my friend, Dave McQueen. If you enjoy the memoir-style micro-essays that I read on In This Story, please consider checking out my full-length book entitled By Accident, A Memoir of Letting Go. It's now available for sale on Amazon and Audible as a paperback, audiobook, or ebook. You can also order a copy through your favorite independent bookseller, which could use your support. Speaking of which, thanks so much for your support. Again, the title is By Accident, A Memoir of Letting Go by yours truly, Joe.